Wonderful, wonderful. And welcome to Afternoon Tea with Docs. I'm Dr. Linda. I'm an emergency medicine physician from Sheffield, and I'm here with my lovely co-host, Dr. Erica, GP from the West Midlands, and we are both lifestyle medicine physicians. If you're new to our show, well, we are here every Sunday at 5 p.m. UK time, bringing you world-renowned experts like our guest today, Rohini Bajekal, to bust medical misinformation and share practical, evidence-based lifestyle advice that you can implement right away to help you prevent, treat, and reverse chronic diseases in supportive community setting. After the interview, if you have joined us on Zoom today, you will be able to speak to us and our guest expert off camera to help you answer any burning questions and get to know our supportive community. It's so wonderful to see so many familiar faces joining us today. We love to get to know all of you. So please do share away and let us know where you are joining in from and what questions you will have for us today.
Today we're speaking to Rohini Bajekal about her PCOS journey. Rohini is a nutritionist and a board-certified lifestyle medicine professional. She's based in London and has previously worked in India and Singapore. She is a keen recipe developer and is passionate about making delicious, affordable, and nourishing plant-based meals. In her spare time, she volunteers as a cookery teacher at Made in Hackney, the UK's only eco-community cookery school and charity. She's also communications lead at Plant-Based Health Professionals UK, an organisation that provides education around the benefits of plant-based diet in the prevention and management of chronic disease. She also provides expertise around South Asian diets as part of the Dietitian and Nutritionist Advisory Committee at Diet ID. She is the co-author of Living PCOS Free, which will be published in February 2022, but it's already available for pre-order. We'll share the link in the chat with you in a minute.
Thank you very much for joining us today, Rohini. Thank you so much for taking this time on your Sunday to share your story and to educate us and our guests on PCOS and how to live PCOS free. So,
thank you for having me. I've been such a fan of your platform, and you both are so industrious. I know that you work so hard to get so many people on here and raising awareness of lifestyle medicine, plant-based nutrition. It's just amazing. And so I'm really honored to be here, and hopefully everyone who's listening will learn a bit more about PCOS, and obviously I'm excited to share my story as well.
Thank you very much. And so let's jump right in. And could you share with us what got you interested in the first place in nutrition?
So actually, I retrained as a nutritionist after several years working in the food industry for big corporations like Heineken and Lindt Chocolate. I was doing all kinds of public relations work and marketing, and really I kind of made the connection that the foods I was promoting weren't necessarily the best. I can see the sun's coming a bit in my face, so I might just draw the blinds actually, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Suddenly the sun is setting.
Thank you very much for everyone joining us today. Do let us know if you have any questions in the chat below. And if you're watching it on YouTube, if you comment, we can actually get straight back to you. So do ask away and let us know your burning questions.
That should be a lot better. Sorry for that. Yeah, so it was, I was working in a completely different industry and living a very different lifestyle. And it was really making the connection between the foods that we put on our plate and the foods that bring us health. And that was something I observed with my own eyes when I moved to India, was that there were people all around that kind of adopted the standard Western diet. So they were eating all the spoils of the Indian diet, like samosas and deep fried food, as well as unhealthy things like pizza and burgers and chips and soda on a really regular basis. And I could see that all around me. It was sort of when I was in my mid-20s, I decided that I was going to retrain as a nutritionist, and it wasn't easy. My first degree was in theology at Oxford. So I was an arts student and very passionate about the arts, and taking statistics for the first time and biochemistry. It wasn't always easy. And luckily I do come from, family of medical professionals. So my parents are both surgeons, and that obviously gave me that probably a bit of a grounding in science. I remember my mum trying to teach me GCSE biology, which resulted in a lot of arguments. But it was great to retrain and to follow my passion. I think I was about the keenest student redoing my nutrition degree, just because I think older students often they know what they want. They're there for a reason. So I loved retraining as a nutritionist, and it kind of changed the course of my life, because I know there's nothing else that I want to do with my life. I think I'll be doing this forever. And there's lots of things I do in my job that are different on a day-to-day basis. But I think lifestyle medicine and nutrition is just, I think when I found it, it felt like, I don't know if you've felt this before, where everything just comes together and makes sense. Whereas
that's exactly how it feels when we went into lifestyle medicine. It's just that moment when the information comes together after many years of pattern recognition, and it's just like, boom, that's it.
Yeah, it's really it really kind of all made sense. And so there's a lot of reasons why I retrained, but I think it was just something that I need to do. And it actually resulted in me doing long distance with my partner. He was in Singapore, I was in the UK, and then vice versa. So it was a lot of hardship on my personal life, but actually I think when you know you want to do something that major and it's going to shift everything for you, you've got to find a way to do it. So I highly recommend that. I think you're never too old and it's never too late. That's my mantra. And I think, I would tell anyone who has a passion they want to follow that it's incredible and it can change everything in your life.
And we have seen in actual research that people who have purpose in their lives that they believe in passionately, they actually live longer than those who don't. So it's wonderful to hear that you have found your passion and your purpose in your life. And that has brought us here today to talk about your own personal journey as well with PCOS, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome. Which you have only just started to share not so long ago, because it's been not only personal journey, but one that's been quite emotional too. And we are really grateful for you to come on and share this story to help others as well. Would you let us know how it all started?
Yeah, so PCOS is a really common condition. It's actually the most common endocrine condition worldwide, and the exact cause isn't entirely known, although there's a range of metabolic, environmental, various factors that potentially are at play, and it affects between 10 to 20% of women, or it can also affect trans men as well. So I usually say people with PCOS to be inclusive to the fact that actually this condition can also affect men, as the latest study from the UK showed. So I think to be technically accurate and scientifically accurate as well as inclusive, it's important to get the definition right. But it actually comprises a range of symptoms, and we can talk about that in detail. But it was something that I kind of had heard of in the back of my head. I grew up with my mother, Dr. Rohini Bajekal, who some people listening to this may be familiar with her work. She's a gynecologist and a huge advocate in lifestyle medicine. And growing up with a mother who was so passionate about gynecology, my parents were very lucky in that they loved being surgeons. They're so passionate about medicine. It was their calling. Probably what turned my sister and I off, because I think if you've got parents who are like so keen, we were like, okay, we'll do something different. We'll chart our own paths in life. But we always had conversations around the dinner table and things like that, very open, very different to even other friends of mine who are South Asian, and that we would discuss literally everything about periods, our bodies, things like that. It was quite open. But as everyone knows, when you're growing up, you don't really want to listen to your parents. And so when I was growing up, we had kind of an interesting journey in that my sister turned vegan at a very young age. So from the age of about 12 or 13, I'd adopted a vegan diet and vegan lifestyle. We were ethical vegans. We didn't know about the health benefits back then. We didn't even think it was a healthy lifestyle necessarily. For us, it was very clear from the ethical side that this is something we need to do. This was 20 years ago, so a really long time ago. And we were literally the only vegans in the village, particularly as a South Asian family. There weren't many vegans of color that we had met in our circle, certainly. And my mother and father would cook everything from scratch. They worked incredibly long hours on the NHS, like 100 hours a week, and they would still manage to always make sure we had healthy home-cooked food. And our school was really worried when they found out my sister and I were vegan, that they used to measure our height and things every year. And then I'm 5'8", my sister's 5'9", and they were like, damn, these vegans keep growing. Yeah, so it was, we grew up really, honestly, quite healthy and strong, and we ate healthy home-cooked Indian food like dal and rice and lots of vegetables, tons of fruit. I always had breakfast when I was growing up, a bowl of porridge or Weetabix with berries. And you know, once we found out about B12 supplementation, we took that as well. But it was a very different world. The kinds of, you got accidentally vegan junk foods, and I do happen to know all of them from those days. I knew exactly the Oreo biscuits or the party rings that were vegan, but really most of my diet was whole plant foods, and that was kind of rare for teenagers. But that was just the only options I had, especially as a vegan. It wasn't like there was a plethora of options back then. So I did struggle with my periods. I had painful and heavy periods, which is actually, they're not symptoms. Pain is not a symptom of PCOS. It can be a symptom of other conditions like endometriosis or fibroids and things like that. But I didn't have anything like that. I just had painful periods, which is very common. And I took the pill. You know, my mother advised me that that would help, and I would take it back to back so that I didn't have to have bleeds, and I could actually get through my GCSEs and my A levels. And it was really helpful. It was a real lifesaver because it meant that I didn't have to suffer the monthly pain and the, you know, the exhaustion and things like that. So I went off to university, and I was still on the pill at this time. And I was studying at Oxford, and I kind of thought, oh, this is going to be great. I'll meet so many other like-minded vegetarians and vegans and things. And I didn't. It was really hard. People didn't know what a vegan was. So I was constantly asked if I rummaged in the bin. And I said, no, that's a freegan. I just don't want to hurt animals. But no one really understood. And I didn't have, you know, much access to a kitchen and things like that. It was really hard. You're working really long hours, studying a lot, also wanting to have fun and socialize and make the most of being at university. So I started to eat a lot more vegan junk foods. So I was living on a lot. I can't even eat falafel now because that's something I ate all the time. Chips, lots of alcohol, you know, binge drinking, student culture, really, really common there. And my health did start to suffer. And in my last year at university during finals is when I had my first kind of official PCOS flare up. So I suddenly developed really bad cystic acne all over my face. Bearing in mind, I was on the pill at this point and had been for years. So nothing had changed on that regard, but suddenly it was awful cystic acne to the point where I felt terrible about leaving my room. And I'd already suffered with anxiety. I was a sort of anxious younger person with very low self-esteem in many ways. I kind of had the inner self-confidence, but I think a lot of people struggle with that when they're younger, and particularly in a highly academic, pressurized environment. You never feel like you're good enough. I know a lot of people at medical school suffer with the same things of not feeling good enough. And I was the only woman of color in my college reading my subject. And I actually think I was the only person in the entire year. I was the only woman reading my subject in my college. It was a very male-dominated special area. So I did struggle, and I didn't really realize that anxiety was anything to do with PCOS or that it could have any links. And I was constantly trying to pick myself up when I felt bad by having caffeine or sugary sweets to give myself an energy boost. And then it was a kind of cycle of constantly never feeling energized. And after the exams, I started to get scalp hair loss, and I was young. I was 20, not even 21. And my mum said, okay, this may be PCOS, like we should get this looked out. And I said, don't be ridiculous. I'm not overweight. that's all I knew about PCOS, is that people were overweight, and I had never really struggled with my weight. I was, I think I was a size 10 at the time, and I was sort of a healthy, regular weight. I wasn't, it's not something that was on my mind at all. And I just thought, oh, that doesn't really apply to me, and I'm on the pill anyway, and it's just stress of exams. I'm just going to forget about this. And about 6 months after I left university, the symptoms did get better, and the scalp hair loss stopped. I noticed that certain things were getting better, but I was still struggling every now and then. And whenever my lifestyle got worse, so I was really neglecting sleep, or I was eating out all the time, my symptoms would flare up. So I was on this roller coaster for the next 5 years in London, where it was a case of, I had almost every symptom of PCOS under the sun. So I had excess hair growth, and I would have to spend a lot of money on laser or anything, even though I didn't have the money then. It was like something that it was very stigmatizing. So I wanted to do everything I could to manage the physical symptoms of it. So that acne, scalp hair loss, anxiety. I wouldn't say I had depression, but I definitely suffered with low mood. I had sleeping issues, and I thought it was cool not to sleep. And I'm the absolute opposite now, but I was like, oh, you can sleep when you're dead, that kind of attitude. And my lifestyle was incredibly frenetic. I would be at client events every evening, out in London till 11, midnight or something, and then getting very little sleep and working long hours. And so it was really a recipe, a perfect storm for PCOS, is what I can say. And the pill obviously prevented some of the symptoms from showing up in full force. But whenever I tried to come off the pill, because I thought, okay, let me just see if my cycles are regular, see how I can manage, I could not cope. I would come off the pill, the acne would be out of control. I wouldn't leave my flat. And I tried so many things. When people say, oh, did you try doing this and that? I was like, okay, I tried everything. I went to see a naturopath, dermatologists, doctors, but I was not in a place to listen to advice. I didn't really know where to go. At this point, I didn't really want to ask my mum for help in that much detail, because I was a young person. I wanted to be able to figure it out myself. I didn't know fully that it was PCOS. I just didn't join the dots necessarily between the different symptoms. And I didn't realize that PCOS could be so multifaceted and have so many different things going on. So until I think a real breaking point happened when I was 25, and I'd had a particularly bad PCOS flare up. And I'd started to experiment with trying to include healthier foods in my diet. So I was having things like green juices and I thought were really healthy, like protein bars or energy bars, and going to the gym more. But it didn't really help. And I didn't really know what to do. I didn't really know where to start. I didn't know what exactly was healthy. And I completely moved away from the kind of food I was eating at home when I was growing up, like simple Indian cooking or beans and things like that. That was just like not a feature of my diet. It was very much Pret sandwiches, pastries, black coffee, that busy lifestyle sort of diet. And when I was 25, I decided something's got to change. And I had this urge to move to a different country and try something new. I knew what was going on in London just wasn't working for me. So I moved over to India to work for a healthy F&B company. And that's when things really changed, because I was forced to slow down. Despite the fact I was working really long hours there, I actually slept 8 to 9 hours every night. I was eating I lived in an apartment with a few other people, and we had a cook who came in and we shared that food between us. And so it was a very different setup. Obviously, I was very privileged to have that, but it was home cooked Indian food again. So things like brown rice, lots of dal, lots of vegetables, lots of salads. And suddenly everything started to change. I started to sleep better. My mood was better. I loved being in sunny weather. So the sunshine really helped. I was able to fall asleep at night. Probably I was eating more in line with my circadian rhythms as well. And I stopped drinking alcohol almost entirely because I didn't have that fast paced going out culture of London. All of that made a huge difference to my mental and physical health. And the PCOS symptoms improved phenomenally, and I was able to thrive, and I fell in love with my husband. Obviously he was my boyfriend then. He was really sporty, and that was something I was never. So I'm someone who could sit for hours reading a book on the sofa without moving, much to the dismay of my mother, who was a college, like she used to be an athlete at school. And she was like, come on, just get moving. And I was like, no, like, I was completely not someone that liked to work out or anything. And my partner was the opposite. So he loved weight training and things. And I would go along and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I started to do it, and I noticed so many things improving. Like my skin cleared up, the hair growth was far less, my anxiety disappeared, I was sleeping better, I lost quite a bit of weight. And initially people were like, are you not eating properly, or whatever. They were, worried, because I was already quite slim. And I was like, I am eating so much more. I'm eating in abundance because I'm eating all these like whole plant foods. And without even thinking about it, it was just my lifestyle change. It was almost the ideal way to have a lifestyle change, because rather than going on a diet or trying to start an exercise regime, I just changed my environment in many ways. And that's not something that's easy to do necessarily, but I was lucky I did that. And because I had all these lifestyle changes, quite literally, that's when I made the connection about nutrition. And I was like, how can I feel so different? I'm 7 years older than I was at university, 7-8 years older, and I feel way younger, way more energized. And I can say that's true for me now. I mean, it's been years since then, and I feel constantly energized and happy. And I was able to come off the pill relatively recently, and even after India, and have regular cycles, which I had noticed before when I tried to come off the pill, my cycles were not regular. And that's obviously one of the hallmarks of PCOS. But my story didn't really end there, because whilst being really healthy when I was in India and eating all this incredible plant-based food, when I moved back to the UK and started my nutrition degree, I was really scared by a lecture that started early on, where they said vegans were malnourished and that we need to eat eggs and oily fish. I was actually weaned on fish in India when I was a baby, as we're South Indian, and fish is a big part of the culture that my dad is from. I'd never really liked meat. I ate it until I was 12 or 13. But I'd never really taken to it the way that I had with fish and eggs. And we were told that was really healthy. So I started to eat fish and eggs. And bearing in mind, I really, I had lost my way a lot after university in terms of veganism. I don't judge myself now, but back then, and it's taken me a while to even talk about it in front of vegans or other health professionals who are vegan, because you can get a lot of judgment, like, oh, you were never really vegan. And I was like, try going back 20 years and seeing how hard it was as a young person to be vegan back then. It took a lot. And it was by the time I left university and my health was in crisis, I just didn't really have the knowledge or the information of knowing how to sustain this way of eating. And I didn't even know any other vegans apart from my sister and my mum. So I look back on it, and I think the reason that I kind of strayed and lost my way has actually ended up me being a more empathetic health professional now, and knowing what I know, just to give more support to people who are finding it difficult because their families and friends are not vegan, or their environment is difficult. The world has changed a lot since then, and it is a lot easier. But I think anyone who doesn't have compassion for people who find it tricky. I mean, I don't relate to that. I try to give people as much compassion as possible, including all of my patients. But I'd strayed a lot. And when I was there, I started eating eggs and fish again. And I did a simple finger prick test when I was at university. All the nutrition students, we were testing our blood glucose levels. And I thought mine would be great because I was really lean, working out 5 days a week, studying nutrition, come on. And I was in this boring town with nothing to do. So I was never drinking, never eating out, was just studying all the time. I was like, it's going to be great. I sleep 8 hours a night. I'm great. I look amazing. At the time, that's how I felt. I had my blood glucose monitor. They took the test, and I could see the numbers flashing on the screen, and I was like, and then they said, oh, your levels are really high, you're pre-diabetic. And I was like, that can't be true, not from a single reading. So then I had my HbA1c, the long-term measure of blood glucose, taken. I went back to my GP in London and had the test repeated, and he was like, no, you're pre-diabetic. I was like, I'm 26, I can't be pre-diabetic. And obviously my father had type 2 diabetes, and he has shared a story via plant-based health professionals of putting it into remission. And actually, this is something I've never shared publicly before. It is in my book that's coming out. But it was a real shock to the system, because the idea that you can look at someone and tell how healthy they are is so flawed. And it's something I'm deeply against. I thought that I was being really healthy by eating eggs and oily fish, but I was pre-diabetic, and I don't think I was when I was in India. Obviously, I didn't have my blood glucose measured then. As soon as I stopped eating the eggs and oily fish, my blood glucose levels went down, and I would still say they were higher than I'd like they were in the normal range, but higher than I'd like. But I was able to see a significant drop just by changing the eggs and oily fish. Apart from that, I was eating entirely plant-based. So I was having porridge, lots of greens, lots of vegetables. It was all I had added was salmon and mackerel or whatever twice a week, and some eggs. That was it. And so, yeah, I know that's not exactly a randomized control study. It's just N=1, but that was my personal experience. And that was kind of fascinating to me. So I went fully whole food plant-based after that point. My dad had put his diabetes in remission a couple of months before. And obviously I started to reconnect with veganism again as the ethical belief system I'd grown up in and kind of strayed from, and found really an incredible community that did not exist 20 years ago when I'd first gone, or 50 at this point it was like 15 years ago, that didn't exist. Things like cowspiracy and forks over knives and things like that were coming out at that time, and so many more people were waking up to it, and I just had the courage then, and the conviction in myself, the confidence after moving to a different country and setting up my life, that I just didn't have when I was younger. So I left university being a plant-based nutritionist, and that was really a big change from when I'd gone in. I didn't realize that everything I was learning in lectures wasn't necessarily it wasn't the whole picture. We learned that vegans and vegetarians were anemic, and all the things that everyone is taught, but that's what the textbook said, and we were warned that these aren't nutritionally complete diets. So educating myself, I did the eCornell course and things like that, which helped. But there was a lot of supplementary reading I did to educate myself about plant-based nutrition, and get to a place where I'd be the healthiest yet. And I since then, my PCOS was almost entirely in remission. Whenever I've had big moments that I haven't managed very well, like I moved from Singapore to the UK in 2018, I had 5 house moves. I got engaged and married in the space of 3 months. It was incredibly exciting time, but it was also stressful, and stress can be good stress and bad stress. But this was just so much happening, and I had another PCOS flare up to the point where I had significant scalp hair loss before my wedding, cystic acne, everything. Irregular periods started again, and I could feel myself sliding backwards. And that's when I realized, okay, I have to keep on top of this. It's not just nutrition, it's all 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine. So that has been instrumental to me. The idea that plant-based diets can reverse things, I don't like the word reverse for chronic diseases, because I don't think you can truly reverse chronic diseases. I think you have to constantly manage them, and you can certainly have incredible results, amazing, you can put them in remission. As you can see, I don't have that cystic acne anymore. But it's misleading to say that you can completely reverse things. So I prefer the term remission. And I have since learned, when I did the BSLM diploma in 2018, the lifestyle medicine diploma, that was really helpful for me to understand all 6 pillars, that you can't just have one without the other. And it is this domino effect where if you neglect one pillar, the others come crashing down quite often. And I think plant-based nutrition, obviously I would say this as a nutritionist, but I think it is the cornerstone. And I think so many of us would agree, when you are putting in the foods that nourish you, so many other things fall into place. I think my story, I was really reticent about sharing my story for a long time, because I do feel that I was very privileged in some ways, that I did have a mother who's a gynecologist, but even with that, I was so not willing to listen. I didn't want to, I didn't want to know. You can bury your head in the sand, even with the answers right there. Sometimes you're just not open to hearing the truth. Secondly, because about 70 to 80% of people with PCOS are in larger bodies, I did feel that, should I be talking about this? And I've never really struggled with weight, but weight is just one symptom. Gaining weight is just one symptom of PCOS. There is there are some people, about 20 to 30%, who have lean PCOS, where their BMI may be in the normal range, or they may even be underweight. But they have.
I think that's very important to highlight for any metabolic disease, that we are focusing. The old school of saying is that we are focusing on obesity and those who are overweight, and we are completely missing that 1 out of 4 patients with normal weight and even slim actually suffer from metabolic syndrome, which predisposes our patients to all the chronic diseases, diabetes, heart disease, autoimmune diseases. And it's so nice to hear it from you as well, to repeat that it's not about the weight. We can be overweight, we can be normal weight, and we can be suffering from these diseases. So we are focusing on the wrong thing when we are talking about obesity on a regular basis with our patients. Lose weight. And also, losing weight doesn't help our patients to lose weight. So it would be very nice if you start shifting the conversation to gaining health through.
I completely agree. I've had, PCOS flare-ups when I've been larger, smaller. It's so much more to do with stress, nutrition, how you're moving your body, all of these things, your sleep. I would much rather focus on behaviors, and that will lead to outcomes. When you're focusing on behaviors and you're doing it for health, I think that's so much more motivating than fear-based techniques where you say to someone, if you don't lose weight, you're never going to get pregnant, or if you don't lose weight, this isn't going to happen. The two things that I struggle with in the PCOS space is this. I'm not saying that there isn't a relationship. Of course there is. Of course, we do need to look at weight, but it being the only focus and just being told to lose weight is not helpful.
Secondly, also, it is just feeding our patients into the diet machine, where we are pushing them into being anxious and nervous about their weight, instead of focusing on what could I do to actually gain health? How could I do that? So as a healthcare professionals, as a group of us, we need to change the language to what you're saying, how we are doing that. And that brings us to, what is the nutrition for PCOS? What do you think are those little tricks that you would feel helpful if our patients would hear from us as doctors and as healthcare professionals at different level, so that they incorporate into their daily meals?
I'm so glad you asked me that. So that's a huge part of the book that we've written. We have over 40 of my recipes. All the recipes are plant-based with gluten-free and oil-free options, although we have options for people who do want to include a bit of olive oil and things like that, if they would like. But the focus is really on the same way of eating that is helpful for PCOS, is helpful for type 2 diabetes, for reducing your risk of cancers, of cardiovascular disease, Alzheimer's. It's the same diet. It's a whole food plant-based diet. And I use diet there as a noun, not as a verb of you need to diet. It's filling your plate with predominantly or all plants. Obviously, I would recommend for health, the environment, animals, if you can shift to 100% whole food plant-based diet, there's nothing like it. But I think following the science means mostly, if not all, plants. That's what the science says. And so, I think that we need to focus on that and look at where people are at and moving them, shifting them towards eating more plants. There's a lot of focus in PCOS spaces and other things where it's like, focusing or honing in on one specific food or one specific supplement that's going to help. But the thing that's going to help the most is focusing on getting in a diversity of whole plant foods. That's what I always emphasize. And that can be tailored to your culture, your preferences. I've lived in India, Singapore, the UK, and I have eaten incredible local foods that are whole plant foods in those places, and tailored, my diet as such. And there are specific foods that are helpful, and I can talk about those. But the key thing is, especially to address the underlying insulin resistance, which affects up to, depending on your weight, it affects between 60 to 80% of people with PCOS. It's the underlying driver. So I almost call PCOS the cousin of type 2 diabetes. I have a very strong history of type 2 diabetes in my family, obviously with my father, my wider family affected. And so reducing my risk of that is key. So over half of people with with PCOS will develop diabetes by the time that they're 40 years old. That is so young. So we want to try and reduce our risk and treat the underlying insulin resistance. So the key things to focus on are intact whole grains, and I can't emphasize that enough. There's a huge demonization of carbohydrates in the PCOS spaces, and there's a lot of confusion about it. And the key thing is eating unprocessed intact whole grains as much as possible. So I do include some lightly processed things like bean pasta, like red lentil penne or edamame bean fettuccine, things like that once in a while. And they're great high protein, high fiber options. And they make for me, food is a big part of my life. I love food. I've always been a foodie. So, but most of my the grains that I would eat are intact. So rather than even having rolled oats, I would have oat groats, or I would include grains like amaranth or millet in my porridge. I just toss them in, soak them overnight, and cook them in the morning, and I batch cook to save time. That's really key. So I love experimenting with different grains. I'm a big fan. I wrote my thesis on amaranth, and I think that these micronutrient rich pseudo grains are really helpful for PCOS, because we want to essentially flood our body with antioxidants, with all the incredible nutrients that plant foods contain. And people with PCOS are also particularly sensitive to advanced glycation end products. And that's because we have more receptors on our ovaries. And so advanced glycation end products are particularly high in meat, and they're high in ultra processed foods. So I stay away from things like, browned foods like toast or crackers, or highly processed foods like that, even so-called healthy ones. I was a big fan in my 20s of grabbing every healthy energy bar or healthy food that was like, if you put it on there, I would be all over it. But those are not the foods that bring you health. And even sometimes in plant-based recipes, you'll see a lot of things like, you'll see things like toast and baked char grilled tofu. I try and use water-based methods, so steaming, water sauteing, boiling, that kind of thing. I much prefer that to grilling or barbecuing, which does increase the AGA quantity of the food. But obviously it's not always 100% possible, but I just try and do what I can. I think it's important not to get obsessive or try to micromanage every single aspect of your diet, because you can try and do that, but it is about all the pillars. And just understanding things like AGEs can be really helpful. So you know that, okay, perhaps instead of baking these potatoes, I could just saute them in some water, or steam them and have some steamed new potatoes. Starchy vegetables are great. So potatoes with their skin on, that's when 90% of the potassium is located in the skin. And the fiber content, it's really important. So always choosing fiber-rich foods. So that's the key way, that kind of, for carbohydrates, that's a key component of my diet. And then tons of fruits and vegetables. And I do try to eat whole fruits and vegetables. I obviously moved to India to work for a juice company, and now I don't touch juice because it does have the fiber removed. And these aren't foods that are inherently unhealthy, but when you have insulin resistance, you need to really try to go for the whole food. So fruits are fantastic, vegetables of all kinds, especially dark leafy greens and berries. Those are two foods I include on a daily basis. Nuts, there's this myth that you can't include like fats on, when you're trying to treat insulin resistance. They do need to be more moderate amounts, but I would certainly include a good handful of nuts, particularly omega-3 rich nuts like walnuts, and seeds like ground flaxseed is really helpful for improving insulin sensitivity as well. And then beans are a huge part of my diet. And this may surprise people, but I eat beans almost 3 times a day. And that would probably be unusual for someone. I socialize quite a bit, and I like doing all of that, but I find ways to include beans in my diet regardless. If I have tofu scramble or things like that sometimes, or I add in beans to my porridge. My dad makes this incredible sprouted 5-grain and lentil porridge, which he very sweetly drops off to me every week. I'm very spoiled. I know that.
You are, and knowing your family, they're just so wonderful. And your dad shared a story for type 2 diabetes, and you can just see that all the nutrition that you just shared today is really helping with other chronic diseases, and that's just within one family.
And it's so important. We just address this in the book. There's so much to say about PCOS. Honestly, I could be here for hours. The amount of research we did for our book. What is fascinating that most doctors and even people don't realize is just how intimately linked PCOS is to a host of other chronic health conditions. So a much higher risk of endometrial cancer, cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome, obesity. The list goes on. And in fact, when we were writing the book, we really tried to bring in messages of hope and positivity into some areas of the book, because we want to help people, not scare people, but at the same time, knowing the facts is empowering, and knowing that you can change the course. Your genes do not need to be your destiny. That is what is so important to understand. And so understanding the long-term implications of this condition are really important, because if you're just treating the symptoms, you are not going to address the root cause. And I am a big fan of using allopathic medicine with lifestyle medicine. Anyone who tells me, you see it constantly on blogs and things, a bashing of the pill or other medications, I would not have simply survived my 20s without the contraceptive pill. I would not have been able to cope. I was in such a bad way with my acne. I was not willing to listen or change my lifestyle. I think if I'd known what I know now, maybe I would have made more changes, but really, we need both. We need to understand that there is a time and a place for both. Maybe in the future, I will need to go on medication again, and I'm not going to rule that out. But what I'm doing now to manage my condition, it does require work, it requires thought, but I love this lifestyle. It has given me so much. And it's not restrictive in any way, but I would tell people that look at the whole picture. Don't just zoom in on the symptoms. You can go to see every dermatologist, laser hair specialist, therapist for anxiety. You can see everyone, and I've done that. But you need to look out, and that you need to zoom out and treat the person as a whole. Treat the root cause. Understanding that will help with so many of the symptoms. So I really can't emphasize that enough. And obviously on a plant-based diet, beans and lentils have to be prioritized. And I have a great bloating fact sheet on plant-based health professionals, because a lot of people with PCOS suffer with bloating, myself included. IBS and things like that are more common. But the key thing is to actually get used to increasing fiber gradually. And you can enjoy so many different types of beans and lentils. They are such an important food to include. I put in cannellini beans in my smoothie. I add in lentils to bolognese. I have dal all the time. I have silken tofu and chocolate desserts. I enjoy a lot of incredible foods, but I add in beans and lentils in so many ways into my food. And then that's a key thing. And then obviously herbs and spices, which I'm very passionate about as someone who's Indian. It's really helpful to have anti-inflammatory herbs and spices like turmeric, obviously paired with black pepper to improve the absorption of curcumin. Spearmint has been shown, 3 cups of spearmint tea a day. I think there was a small study that showed it improves symptoms of hirsutism in people with PCOS. And so that's a helpful thing to have, I much rather people focus on the big picture of all the foods that you can to enjoy. But if people want to know specific things that I think are helpful, I think, why not? It tastes delicious to have spearmint tea. It can help. One thing that's really helped me is I was a constant snacker, and even now I have a tendency to snack, and a lot of that is due to the background of insulin resistance. And so I've managed to put to address the root cause of the insulin resistance by changing my meal times as well. So I always have breakfast. It's very important for PCOS to have breakfast. And people with PCOS have higher circulating levels of cortisol, which is the stress hormone, and having breakfast can actually help bring that down. So you want to be having your breakfast and as a good meal. And there was a great webinar we did recently with Dr. Hannah Karliova about optimizing your metabolism on a plant-based diet, which showed that people who eat fewer times a day but include breakfast actually have much better metabolic health. So breakfast is really key. And then I eat a good sized lunch, and my dinner is the lightest meal of the day. So I'll have things like a soup with beans or salad. That will be my dinner. And I really try not to snack in the evening. I try to end my meals with the time the sort of sun sets. So I eat in line with my circadian rhythms. That is so important for PCOS. I did not know this early enough. And I was someone, like many people, who graze all day. And I think this is really common for any medical students who are listening, because you're so busy. Sometimes it's really hard to sit down and have a proper meal, that you just graze on some nuts, some fruit. You can think even these foods that are really healthy, like nuts and fruit, if you're eating throughout the day, that is going to impact you if you have PCOS. So you need to ideally eat that. And if you're going to enjoy things like a dessert or things that are treats or things for you, I would enjoy that with a meal, so rather than eating it on an empty stomach. I have made incredible versions of, I love to bake and I have a massive sweet tooth, but I have found natural ways to satisfy that by using mashed banana, apple puree, flax seeds instead of eggs. So I enjoy a lot of these foods, occasionally, not every day, but there are so many great ways to enjoy flavors and tastes that you like without damaging your health. And I think that is really important to understand, that you don't need to eat like a monk. You can enjoy incredible food, and it's the herbs and spices that give it the most flavor. So I don't cook with oil, or I will eat oil. For example, if I go to a restaurant and I have some olive oil at home, once in a while, I might drizzle it onto a salad if I really want the taste. I don't put hard lines of no oil, no this, no that. That doesn't work for me. It actually causes me additional stress. So even things like alcohol, I don't drink alcohol, but if it's a friend's wedding, I might have a couple of sips of champagne at the toast. And I've personally found that having some flexibility in my life is very key. I'm kind of against the term everything in moderation, because as we know, it can excuse so many things and you can get very confused telling everyone everything in moderation. But what I prefer to do... They
do say moderation is a killer.
Yeah, I completely agree. But I think understanding what's right for you. So for some people, they may need hard lines, but what I will say is that people with PCOS have a much higher risk of disordered eating, including binge eating disorder, bulimia nervosa, and things like that. And so you do need to be careful about telling patients to just lose weight or lose a big amount of weight without giving them guidance, individual treatment, counseling. And it's something that I think everyone can fall prey to. Diet culture, unfortunately, is everywhere, even in the plant-based community. And so having a healthy mindset with regards to food and exercise is important to have. And it's really key to have a supportive community like Afternoon with Docs or plant-based health professionals. It's so important to have a community of people who share the same vision or values as you. For PCOS, there's a lot of great spaces online. Just even having one friend or your partner that you can talk to openly and share when you're feeling rubbish or you're not feeling good. It's really helpful to get it off your chest and not hold it in. But there's so much to say on all of this, even with regards to nutrition, there's so many. I don't want anyone to listen to this and think I have to follow everything that Rohini said. Hopefully, I always encourage my patients to give them the advice. I give them the resources. I send them evidence-based studies or things if they're up for reading that, or I give them more information, but I tell them it's your decision. You're in the driving seat and you can work out what's best for you, because what works for one person may not feel that good for another person. But I do think just trying to shift towards more plants, it can help in so many ways, and you can enjoy all the foods that you like. It doesn't need to be what I'm eating. And that's why I don't want anyone just to eat exactly what I'm eating. We're all different. We all have different needs. For movement, for me, as I mentioned, I'm not like an avid gym goer. I found ways to move that feel really good for me. So I have found that if I do too much HIIT, it actually increases cortisol and increases certain symptoms for me for PCOS and doesn't make me feel the best. So I do short bursts of HIIT. For example, 20 minutes is a good amount for me, but I like hiking, walking a lot. I walk everywhere. I try and do some home workouts because I enjoy those. I try like low and moderate intensity exercise, but you don't need to do, for example, I don't like running, so I'm just not going to be a runner, and I just know that. So that's not something I'm going to force myself to do just because it was trendy in the pandemic for people to start running. It's like knowing yourself and knowing what's going to work. Movement does not mean exercise. Movement is moving your body regularly. It can be in so many ways. And I think this is true for several things. But for PCOS, treating the individual is key, because every single person, every patient in front of you has their own story, their own symptoms. The list of symptoms with PCOS are so wide ranging. We haven't even talked about things like sleep apnea or things like that. And these are really common symptoms of PCOS, but they go under-recognized, particularly in ethnic minorities or people in larger bodies or in trans men. So understanding the whole range of symptoms and connecting the dots and thinking, okay, this may be PCOS, and not just ruling someone out because it's not showing up on a blood test. You obviously need to have the Rotterdam criteria, 2 out of 3, to be clinically diagnosed with PCOS, but don't just rule people out. Give them a chance to share and listen to their symptoms. That's what I would say to people, because there is so much we're learning about this metabolic condition, and we need to, be open-minded and curious. That's really important.
So you have shared so many incredible points here, and I just love the fact that you have highlighted two key information here. I think weight is very important. I think we are focusing way too much on that, and definitely the whole lifestyle, which is sleep, substance misuse. A lot of alcohol has been consumed throughout the pandemic, and unfortunately we are seeing the side effects of that in acute clinical practice, as well in emergency care, and this in GP practices and specialties. Unfortunately, we are locked away, and there's a lot of loneliness, there's a lot of anxiety and depression. And you mentioned that people should be talking about their problems, and it definitely does help just to have a friend or a family member who is there for you, openly discussing the angst that we are experiencing, not only with our conditions, but also with our daily lives. You mentioned diets, and I definitely think it's a key aspect in everything that we do, because we can feed our disease or our health gain every single time we pick up that fork. We can make a decision to feed the disease or our health. And I think it's so powerful, especially now that we have seen that, through your story and through so many of the other patients who are so kind to share here on Afternoon Tea, that it can actually prevent, in some cases, and really address chronic diseases, type 2 diabetes in remission, multiple sclerosis, now your wonderful story about PCOS. And looking at and putting all that into context, into our community, and how we encourage each other to actually do the right things is really, really important. Before, as I'm conscious of time, before we go off, just to ask a few questions off camera with you, would you be so kind to share 3 actionable takeaways in a summary for our listeners? What can they do if they have PCOS and they would like to take control of their lifestyle?
I think number 1 is to understand your why. it's really important for any change. If you don't understand your why, nothing can stick, and it just becomes a short-term thing. And I think for PCOS, so many of the conversations are only around fertility. And that's when I tell doctors to really, anyone who's working or has a friend with PCOS or anything, not to only make it about fertility, because it's so much more than that. So understanding, is it your why that you want to have more energy? You want to have regular periods. Maybe one day you do want to have a baby, and that's something that is important to you. You want to prevent your family history of cardiovascular disease, or just feel better on a day-to-day basis, or treat some of the symptoms. I think understanding your why is really key. Obviously, I would try and make the why something that is not just about the superficial. So I used to be obsessive about my acne and feeling really bad about myself. But actually, when I understood that my why was much more about regaining my health, that made the changes something that were much more likely to stick, because I wanted to feel better and have more energy on a day-to-day basis. If it's only aesthetic, it doesn't tend to stick, is what I find. So I think that's one. And number two is to find ways to incorporate all 6 pillars of lifestyle into your everyday. It doesn't need to be an hour at the gym. It could be 10 minutes of a postprandial walk. I make sure that after I eat a meal, I try and go for a walk around the block, and that actually helps to bring down blood sugar levels as well. So particularly for people who have insulin resistance, that can be a really helpful tip of just, a quick 10 minute burst of exercise. Or it could be something like including an extra piece of fruit in your breakfast, or switching up white rice for brown rice. It can be really simple. It could be 10 minutes of meditation in the morning. It could be 15 minutes of laughing on the phone to a friend. It does not need to be hours and hours every day, because I know that there are people who are single moms with PCOS, or medical students, or people who just don't have much time. All of these tips, and in the book we have a 21-day plan, and the tips are really practical and simple. We're not suggesting that everyone needs to sprout their own grains from scratch every day. Not everyone has the privilege or time or access or whatever to be able to do this. It's understanding that just adding in simple things every day can make a huge difference, and that it can make a huge difference to the way that you feel. And then lastly, it's don't fall for fads. PCOS spaces are full of supplement recommendations, low carb diets, all these things. Try and focus on just the big picture of introducing more whole plant foods. If you don't want to go 100% plant-based, that's okay. Obviously that would be great if that's one of your goals, but actually focusing on just bringing in more plants is going to be helpful, rather than focusing on just one specific supplement. There are supplements that are helpful. We know that people with PCOS are more likely to have vitamin D deficiency, and certain supplements like myo-inositol can actually help restore ovulation and improve fertility. There are some good studies around that. Chromium is another one. But these supplements are not there to replace a healthy diet. You need to focus on the foods first. That's my real key thing, foods first. And then the supplements are there to complement. They're not there to replace. And you're not going to see the benefits if you're having crisps and pizza and hot dogs, and then you're having some supplements. It's just not going to work. So being sensible and understanding that you need to focus on the foods first. And if I could add one more, it's just understanding you don't need to be all or nothing. You might need medication, you might need spironolactone to help with your acne, or you might need things, and that's okay, because your mental and physical health should never be bargained with. And the idea that everyone can put their PCOS in remission entirely just with lifestyle, I don't think is achievable for some people. I don't think everyone can, but I think a lot of people can see huge benefits. And it is, even if you're on medication, you can reduce the amount of medication you're taking, or hopefully one day maybe even be able to come off that medication. But that it doesn't need to be. Please don't feel shamed for taking medication. I've had people shame me when I admit that I was on the pill to manage my PCOS, and they say you were just masking it. They can be really mean. And actually, I think you've got to do what you need to do, and let's not rubbish. We should not rubbish lifestyle medicine, and we shouldn't rubbish allopathic medicine. They both have a time and place.
What an incredible story. And I know it was very hard for you to share it, because it is a very personal disorder, and you have had to go through so many years of struggles, but sharing this story will help so many patients with PCOS. And I'm so grateful for you coming to join us here today on your time on Sunday. And also thank you for everyone who has joined us on YouTube, Instagram, and on Facebook. Please make sure that you order your pre-order your copy, Living PCOS Free, which is available now, and the book will be going on sale in February 2022. So thank you so much for joining today. If you have enjoyed this chat, please make sure that you share it, subscribe if you're on YouTube, and help other patients live a long and fulfilling life by learning about lifestyle medicine and nutrition. We have added all the links from Rohini in the comments and in the chats below. So you can find her on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and on her website, rohinibajekal.com. And if you would like to join us, do join our free membership area on Afternoon Tea with docs.com. And the links are in the comments and in the chat below. Once again, thank you very much for joining. Now we are going off on our non-recorded time where we can speak to